You're watching 12 WKRC TV, a new generation of news. This is 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Newsmakers. In the summer of 2002, 600 low-income families were forced to vacate Huntington Meadows, a housing complex in Bond Hill. The immediate cause was the collapse of the ownership group, PM1 of Milford, Michigan. In the 5 years that PM owned the property, it went through about $20 million of public funds, supposedly designated for renovations. Today, the property remains vacant and boarded up. For 18 months, 12 News reporter Rich Jaffe has dogged this story. Last week, he reported the latest development. A Cincinnati law firm is investigating the eviction with an eye to the possible lawsuit. Here is Rich's report.
At the moment, Huntington Meadows is a multi-million-dollar eyesore. But little more than a year ago, it was home to more than 600 families. In a matter of months, though, families like Tracy Harris and Minnie Black were evicted and angry.
We didn't do anything. Our rent's been paid. Huntington Meadows is the one that broke our lease. We didn't do it.
Who do you think is really responsible for the problems here?
Whomever was in charge of taking care of Huntington Meadows.
Once on the auction block, a major development company, Budget Real Estate, made a valid offer to buy the property and maintain it as low-income housing. That offer was rejected. The apartment shut down, and the company used the money to revitalize a Columbus project instead.
The financing that I used, that I had lined up for Huntington Meadows, I just took it and put it into Woodland Meadows. So the exact same thing could have occurred in Cincinnati at Huntington Meadows.
Now an attorney with a major Cincinnati law firm wants to know why Huntington Meadows was closed.
I think the residents of Huntington Meadows were wronged. I think the public was wronged. I think the developers who were interested in coming in and taking over this property and making it into something great were wronged. And I think that we need to look at why that happened and who's behind it.
Kinsley is gathering information that could lead to a lawsuit against the city, the Federal National Mortgage Association, and developers involved with the Huntington Meadows property. With millions of tax dollars invested, at the time of the evictions, city officials told 12 News they had decided the property needed a new direction.
Up to this point, on the feedback that came from a wide range of stakeholders and on council's direction, that continuing that project as 1,100 units of low-income housing would not be favorably received.
We are looking right now at governmental entities that may have been involved either in the transactions or in evicting the tenants or causing them to leave this property, and what role the government might have played. And if the government's responsible, there certainly would be monetary damages involved.
Kinsley says the lawsuit, if filed, could also stop any current development plans for the property. Rich Jaffe, 12 News.
I am now joined by Jennifer Kinsley, an attorney with Sirkin, Pinellas, and Mezebov, Schwartz, and Jorge Newbery, a partner with Budget Real Estate. It's based in Los Angeles, California. George himself is in Columbus, Ohio. Thank you for coming here this morning, and welcome to Newsmakers. Jennifer, in this particular situation, you say here with Rich in that story that you're looking at government entities that might be involved. Specifically, who do you think was involved in this, and in what way that would warrant a lawsuit?
At this point, it does appear that the City of Cincinnati played a large role in determining the future of this property and in determining what was going to happen. The reason for that, I believe at this point, and what our investigation has shown, is that the City of Cincinnati would have been a creditor in the transaction because they had given upwards of $4 million to redevelop the property when the PM group came in 1998. So certainly the City of Cincinnati is a primary focus right now. We believe that there was discrimination. That was their motive for getting involved and putting a stop to the development of this property as low-income housing.
So what, again, I'm going to ask the question, inside the city then, are you looking at elected officials? Are you looking at employees in the development office, the neighborhood office? What are you looking at?
All of those people, actually. It does appear that certain city council members played a role in stopping this transaction. It also appears that there were employees within the city who would have also been involved. So at this point, anyone that works for the City of Cincinnati that's elected as an official of the City of Cincinnati, is a target.
I just want to make it clear that I invited the city to bring somebody here this morning, and the city manager's office declined. George, in your particular case, you made an offer to purchase this property. From your company's point of view, why were you interested in a property like this? Supposedly it was in terrible shape. Supposedly it was a losing proposition. Why would your company be interested in this?
We bought a number of properties, bought it at essentially discount prices, and with a vision towards turning them around. Usually what happens, and my intention here was to move on site, and
you personally
move on site. As in Columbus, I did move on site. I still live on site a year later, and that's really what it takes, is someone on site really identifying the problems and doing whatever's necessary to rectify those problems.
So let's talk about this. When you got frozen out in Cincinnati, there was another project that's mentioned, it's hinted at in Rich's story, and he's done other stories on it. It's called Woodland Meadows.
Correct.
It looks, and it's very similar. It also was owned by PM. It also went bankrupt, and in that case, your company actually did buy it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what have you done with it?
When we purchased it, there were maybe 400 tenants. We evicted about 130. There was a tremendous amount of gang activity, criminal activity. Property was in shambles. For instance, in the year 2002, there were 5 homicides on the property. There were about 33 shootings. In the past year, 2003, since we purchased it, there have been 0 homicides, and there was one shooting incident. So the change has been
How many people
dramatic.
live there now?
Right now, there's upwards of 800 tenants that are units that are occupied, which probably constitutes 2,500 people. So the occupancy has gone up dramatically. It's become really a success story in Columbus, and a big difference there was when we met with Cincinnati civic officials. There was really a very cool reception, to say the least.
In fact, I want to show you something that you wrote, and let the viewers see this. After meeting with city officials last year, George wrote a memo that said the city is intent on limiting the supply of affordable housing within city limits, and that the city hopes that Huntington Meadows will be demolished completely and converted to townhomes and single-family residences, which will attract higher income families. Who did you meet with, and from whom did you draw those conclusions?
We met with representatives of Alicia Reese's office. We met with representatives of Peg Mortal in the city's development department. And honestly, coming from Los Angeles, or actually really from any other part of the country, I never experienced what I heard that day. It wasn't even hints at, hey, we would not like to have poor people in the city. It was, they said, the city council has overwhelmingly approved the impaction ordinance, which I never heard of, but they explained and said that the city felt that they were impacted with poor people, that they had too many poor people, and that the purpose of this ordinance was to limit the supply of affordable housing in the city limits in hopes of dispersing some of the poor people into outlying cities and counties who could then share the purported burden of these poor people. And that, for me, that was, and for someone to actually say that, let alone a politician, I was just stunned. I mean, it seems something that in the year 2002, in this century, you really, I mean, you would think that's something you would maybe hear 100 years ago, but you were not here today.
Jennifer, given that sort of story, who are in this potential lawsuit, who are your clients? Is it George's company? Is it the former residents? Who are the clients?
It's both, actually. George certainly has expressed an interest in going forward with any sort of lawsuit that we might pursue, because obviously he suffered damage as a result of this. He and his company were prepared to come here to Cincinnati, renovate this property, make it into a wonderful place for people to live, and they obviously were cut out of that situation because of the government. So he has been hurt in this transaction, and his company as well. But certainly the residents, people who lived in Huntington Meadows who were forced to leave the property for no good reason, We're not talking about people who were living off of government assistance or who were not working or who were not being responsible. I spoke with a woman the other day named Kathy. She had lived in Huntington Meadows for about 10 years, paid her rent on time, was a working mother, got no government assistance.
Yeah, this was not Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority. This was privately owned property.
Correct, correct. So certainly these people, one woman I spoke to was forced to leave Huntington Meadows and had to go to a homeless shelter.
If you pursued this and you won, would those former residents actually get anything out of that?
That is certainly what our hope is at this point. Our hope is to get compensation for those people who were wrongfully evicted, who had done nothing wrong, who were not responsible for this.
Does it make a difference that somebody like Peg Myrtle, who was in that package and who George just mentioned, is no longer with the city? The fact that she has now left the city and is in with a bank, does that affect the lawsuit?
Absolutely not. We are talking about suing the government, which is an entity.
The entity.
These individual people, we understand, come and go. That's the nature of government. We're not talking about getting to Peg Myrtle's private assets or Alicia Reese's private assets. We're talking about what they did as government employees.
You raise Alicia. George mentioned Alicia Reese. This is Bond Hill. Alicia Reese's father's family business is right next to Huntington Meadows. Are you charging here a conflict of interest with Alicia Reese?
At least the evidence that we have uncovered at this point certainly looks like there is a conflict of interest. One thing I did notice, George has mentioned the impaction ordinance. Alicia Reese did abstain from voting on that, and I think properly so. I do think she probably should have abstained from getting involved in this transaction because she and her family did stand to profit.
George, realistically, you know, this is boarded up property now. These former residents have scattered to lots of other places. Some found new places better than others. Realistically, what's the future of Huntington Meadows? That's a lot of housing units. Can somebody still come in, or is this deteriorating as we sit here?
No, it's clearly deteriorating by the day, but it's without a question something that could still be renovated and restored as affordable housing.
Would your company still be interested?
Be very interested.
Are you in communication with the city?
No. They made it clear that day that they were not interested in maintaining it as affordable housing, whether for our company or any other company. And so that would be a challenge to renovate that property as affordable housing with the city's current policies.
So what do you think the city intends to have happen on that property, if not with those structures?
Well, I know what they prefer to see, which is, I mean, they made it wasn't something that a hidden agenda. They would like to see higher income families living on that property, and if that means new townhomes, new single family residences, that's what they would like to see.
There has been a lot of talk at City Hall that there are other developers who the city is interested in working with. If you move forward with this proposal, or with this lawsuit, would that stop everything? Would that stop the city from doing what George just described as the city's intention?
It definitely could, and that would also be one of the remedies that we would seek. In addition to monetary damages for the city's role in what happened before, we also would seek to stop any prospective development in the future. And if we prevail in the lawsuit, that is relief that would be available.
George, you say you're not in communication with the city at all anymore. What's your relationship with Columbus city government because of what you've done with Woodland? Or it sounds like, I mean, you've got a self-interest here, you've described it very well, but do you have a good relationship with Columbus city government in an ongoing sort of way?
Columbus has been, there was certainly some skepticism when we first purchased the property. They also had invested some of their city funds into the Woodland Meadows project, and there was a great deal of government funds which were also squandered, very much akin to Huntington Meadows.
Almost exactly like
almost exactly like Huntington Meadows. So there was certainly no offer of city funding, not that we were looking for it, but there was at least a nod and good luck, and a sincere good luck. The city really, they realize that they have low-income families. These people need a place to stay, and I think everyone really wanted to see it succeed. And they've done what they could. The police department and the city and the county have done what they could, and I wouldn't expect to look for funds for them to actually go into city or county funds to help us.
Jennifer, we're just about out of time, but to put this lawsuit together, you haven't filed this yet. Do you need certain types of information? Should former residents get in contact with you? Should other people get in contact with you?
Absolutely. We are looking to hear from any former resident of Huntington Meadows that will tell their story.
What telephone number can they call?
They can call me at 513-721-4876, and that's my office number.
Okay. Thank you very much for being here this morning. This is obviously a story that Rich Jaffe has continued to follow, and we'll continue to follow it here on Newsmakers and see what happens with this. Hope you have you back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. After the break, we'll have a reflection on the role of Martin Luther King in the 21st century.
I have a dream that one day down in Alabama with its vicious race